My name's Zachary Conan. I'm here with David and Craig. If you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel and definitely give this video a like and leave in the comments some thoughts or something. But we just watched the best of both worlds. Generally considered one of the best Next Generation episodes of Star Trek. Definitely one of the most famous cliffhangers of any season of television. There's not much to go into here. You guys know the story. This is the one where Picard becomes a Borg, Locutus of Borg, to be exact. That's it. That's my summary so far. But I want to see David. David, you look like you want to say something about this episode.
Well, I did want to say, firstly, that Locutus is he who speaks, right? That's Latin.
Yeah, in Latin.
But I also want to say, we are the Borg. We have come to assimilate you. Resistance is futile. So you should just agree with this analysis. So.
Absolutely. And subscribe. Thank you for watching this video.
And have a nice day. No,
That's the end of it. It was definitely interesting. It's been a long time since I've seen anything Enterprise. My dad used to... If it was on TV, my dad was going to have it on. It was just one of those things. Like, he would never skip an episode, even if he's seen it 100 times. So, I definitely have experience watching some Enterprise, and I know the characters, but...
This show's called Next Generation.
Next Generation. I always say Enterprise because I name it by the ship.
Well, I've been having you watch a bunch of Enterprise episodes.
That's true.
So.
Yeah, Next
Link
Generation.
right there. Click for the latest one. Me and Craig covered. Boom. See? Another one.
But I want to say that there was a movie involving the Borg.
Yeah,
because
First
I don't
Contact.
think I haven't seen this. I've seen the movie.
Click for the link. Me and David discuss Star Trek First Contact.
You're welcome. I'm
David,
giving you all your plugs,
yeah.
man.
Craig, you're doing good at this. No, I was obsessed with this episode when I was a kid. I also grew up in a household that loved The Next Generation. The Next Generation just seemed to completely capture an entire generation. But I just remember just thinking it was so cool that Picard was a Borg and he was a bad guy. I remember looking at like pictures and books and just watching this episode over and over and over again. It was one of those.
The only thing is like, I guess because of the episodes we've been watching lately, I went into this thinking we were going to have some kind of moral discussion. I can't really pick anything out.
There is a moral. There are some moral dilemmas here. Like, what would you guys actually say this episode's about? Because I wouldn't say that at its heart it's about the Borg. What would you guys say it's about?
It felt like it was a... it felt like this was there was a handful of things going on, but one of the main things going on was Riker being forced to step into a captain's position, being proven that he can do it, and then obviously still not wanting
and that's
to.
where I absolutely think the morality of this picture of this show, these two episodes
I can summarize it in one word.
Go for it.
Autonomy.
Exactly.
And we see that. We see in every scene throughout the entire 2-episode series of the series, we see that every single decision is framed around the idea of autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
So not only does Captain William Riker have his own autonomy and the greater whole of the entire 2 episodes, but we also see the autonomy of Shelby, the sub-commander there, the other first officer. We also see the autonomy being taken away from Picard as well, which I find fascinating, that is said in so many different ways all at once. It's wonderful, it really is. I've really enjoyed the 2-episode.
What did you think of... Well, I've already spoken in a couple of videos here about how I admire Riker's constant decisions of forsaking the captain's chair. I like that he knows that he's a first mate, but like this episode proves that he has the capabilities necessary in order to captain a starship, and not only that, but outsmart probably the brightest captain that Enterprise has ever seen as well, because he technically beat him.
Yeah, technically beat Picard.
He went to the throne of his father, and and it's not like a... I'm not exactly sure how to frame this correctly. It was just all this responsibility was thrusted upon him, and he, to me, gracefully assumed responsibility.
And not only that, but part of his autonomy was making the decisions to listen to Guinan, to listen to Shelby, to listen to the Admiral, and to take those hard choices and make those hard stances and still succeed in those circumstances.
And I think his frustration stemming from no one is recognizing his own autonomy to remain in his current position. It's a interesting, well, it's an interesting fable about career advancement, right? And it came out in 1990, in a time where business was most definitely booming, and we still had that 80s ethos of advance as fast as you can. The biggest 80s movies concerning business were like Wall Street and Cocktail, about these young men who are just driven and ferocious. And that's also why I like Riker. He's the antithesis of that standard 80s young male who's supposed to just want the captains or want to be president no matter what. And I think that it was an interesting take on that, especially for 1990, saying that, like, it's okay.
I wanted to just take a moment to set aside a question for you, Craig. I wanted to ask what your initial impression of the Borg was. What was your first feelings when you first saw the introduction of the Borg? Beyond the discussion and dialogue, which was happening in the first 30 minutes of the first episode, but when you were actually physically introduced to the Borg cube and to the Borg collective, what was your impression?
The hard thing is that this wouldn't be my first impression because I've seen the Borg like a million times.
Sure, but I mean, this is the first time you've seen these 2 episodes, right?
Yeah, this is the first time I've seen this specific showing of the Borg. I guess because I already know what the Borg are, I was only questioning. Like, I had some questions that I'm sure you guys could answer, but they're not going to really add to the discussion. Like, where did the Borg originate, and what are the Borg's ultimate goal? But it seems, I mean, it's easy enough to say that their goal is to assimilate.
Yeah, the ultimate goal is assimilation, and no one knows where they come from.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that's great.
There you go. But no, I mean, I think David's more so asking, forget if this was your first time seeing the Borg. What do you think of the Borg as villains in the first place?
Yeah.
The great thing is that it's almost like a battle of wits as opposed to a battle of just strengths. Like, these things, like they were saying, how do we defeat something that knows more about us than we do? And I guess it was just like they used their human wit to overcome it, like think outside of yourself kind of idea. So I don't know, I've always liked the whole logical enemy, because I find a lot of people put logic on a pedestal that it does not deserve to be on. Logic is a tool, not a way of life. So I think the Borg is a good representation of logic being not inherently right.
What were your impressions on the Borg? I know you watched it as a child, Zach, and you probably were terrified. And you've told me before that you did have a fear of the Borg Queen when we addressed First Contact.
If you watch First Contact, you'll get... That's where me and David go deep into, like, the functionality of the Borg as Star Trek villains. And I go pretty deep in there. But I guess to just kind of summarize it really quick, the Borg to me are the ultimate ideals of the collective, but like the collective without an identity. So totalitarianism or fascism, something that if you decide to become a part of it, and it's an unstoppable force, really. And if you decide to become a part of it, you lose the thing that makes you human, that even gave you that free will in the first place.
Very well said. I like that. Yeah, I agree.
But if you watch the First Contact video, we go into it for like 40 to 45 minutes about that. And about how the Borg Queen was retconned into this story as well. Which is kind of forgivable, rewatching Best of Both Worlds now, because the Borg Queen operates as the mouthpiece, as the voice of the Borg in the other one, in which that is certainly what Locutus was. So it's not uncommon. I guess it's not outside of canon for the Borg to nominate a specific face to speak to the rest of the world. And that was my initial problem with that retcon. But watching this again, it's like, oh, this is what they do. They pick a familiar face, I guess, and they have it interact with its or whatever.
my first impression, and after getting through a lot of the Next Gen and watching it, you get an intimate and kind of like a very, like almost like, it's a one-sided attachment on my part to like Captain Picard as a person, but to just see that this throughout the series, the development of Captain Picard as a person on screen and being this, this stoic, this stubborn, this calculating man just get assimilated by this entity called the Borg, and then have his humanity basically stripped away from him bit by bit, and see the actual real world impact of that happening in real time. That was very chilling for me.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond chilling, it was, to me, it was like a really a deep look into what a collective totalitarian authority might actually look like, right?
Yeah.
And we see that throughout the entire 2 episodes. We see that the Borg, they have stripped, and that's a big part of it. It's like how everything is just being stripped away in favor of this one collective. And it just reminds me of that quote by Albert Camus when he said, "We should never favor and side with the microscopic worlds because they are not thinking."
Exactly, but Star Trek's a complicated enough show.
Yeah.
Because it's juxtaposed with the idea that the Next Generation crew, each one of them are unique personalities, and they're very loud and distinct personalities. But they're not simply individualists. They are representative of a collective that acts for the benefit of all of life.
That was really well represented when it came to their last kind of like, oh, this is our last chance. That they were about to throw on the thrusters and just ram it.
Exactly.
And given all their lives, and everyone was just like, well, that's our job. And they started flipping the switches, they were
think a lot of
prepared
people
to do it.
Like make the mistake when they're looking at the Borg of looking like, I think they pick up on the collectivist like symbol of it, but I think that they make the mistake of assuming that must mean that the Next Generation crew aren't a collective as well, and they just don't see the sophistications of, in order to beat this in order to defeat the Borg in here, they all have to come together, and they all have to beat them with their own skill sets. Even Riker gets a little upstaged near the end of the episode.
I also find it ironic and in a poignant way that Data and Worf, both android and alien, come to rescue Picard and then get him back to the Enterprise. It's very interesting that they decided to choose things that are not human to save someone's humanity.
Absolutely.
I found that pretty awesome.
Mm-hmm. I definitely agree.
And they're also, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're like the 2 least, like Data is obviously the least emotional character, and Worf is pretty heavily on certain emotions, right? Like his race feels certain emotions much greater than others. I'm not super familiar with...
Well, Klingons are just impassioned. They definitely sent Worf because he's a warrior and he's head of security, and that would be his job to go there. And they probably sent Data because they didn't think that you could assimilate Data, or that they had no use for him, which First Contact completely disregards. And like that's the main focus. One of the main focuses of that movie is assimilating Data, so that's interesting. But yeah, and this one, I guess they just look at Data as obsolete, as they call him.
Right.
So they thought that those were the 2 least likely, or at least Worf is most capable to fucking handle himself or defend himself because he's head of security, tactical officer.
Yeah, and it's interesting how in this particular series, these 2 episodes, that was the decision-making process of the Borg, and that was their fundamental mistake, wasn't it? Was ignoring the individual. Mm-hmm. And that was a constant and perpetual mistake that they couldn't get out of because the Borg are parasitic in nature. They feed off of others for creativity.
I think a collective is only as good as the individuals that make it up.
Mm-hmm. You are as strong as your weakest link.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So then there's that, and I also wanted to talk about some of the compositional shots. Particularly, I enjoyed how how there was the juxtaposition between the Enterprise and the Borg cube, especially in those still shots when you would see like the action turning into inaction, and then there was just like this hesitant, dramatic pause, right? And that's a lot like how warfare is done. A lot of warfare is like this, it's like a breathing act almost. It's like someone draws in a breath, and then there's this lunge, and then there's another drawing of breath. And that was really well done, that they had that sort of pacing quality to the composition that really just like got me in a frame of mind where I felt like I was kind of in on the action myself.
These are very well put together episodes, most certainly. And the Borg, everything about, I've always loved the design of the Borg. It's one of those things that sticks in your brain. The ultimate cyborg. I mean, it's the stuff that just sticks in your brain, especially the Borg cube. What did you think of the designs, just superficially, Craig?
They're like very non-human. So I think that's exactly what they were going for. The idea that a ship would be shaped like a cube is entirely unhuman, because we would never even assume that would be a good idea. Like.
I can see what you're saying, because a lot of aerodynamics and all of that,
I mean, in space, it doesn't technically matter, but...
Right.
Well, the idea that the cube is featureless and the same on every single side with nothing unique about it, too.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of human qualities is exactly as you're saying.
I mean, look at the Enterprise.
Yeah.
They even used the Enterprise's ability to detach its sphere from its propulsions, right? I mean, they even used the dynamic capabilities of the ship's architecture to be
and just as a contrast, they said in the show, they were like, is this the same ship that we came in contact with before? He said, there's no way to tell for sure, but the dimensions are exactly the same. And I don't think that was the show trying to imply that, yes, this is the same ship. I think that it was the show more trying to imply that there's a very good chance all Borg ships look exactly the same.
Right, there's no difference.
So, and then that's starkly contrasted when there's two of the Federation ships next to each other, and they don't... Like, you can tell that the designs are similar, but they are not the same whatsoever.
Yeah. And even in the shots following after that, when we see the entire Starfleet that was supposed to defend the Borg invasion completely destroyed, we still saw the uniqueness being focused on the destroyed starships rather than on the Borg cube.
They named them all in 2 seconds. Like, they didn't even have to look for the names.
They had some very interesting names, too.
Yeah.
There was the Tolstoy.
Yeah, the Tolstoy.
It is fascinating, because they're entering a realm where, Tolstoy is probably most famous for his kind of Christian mysticism, and we're entering a realm where that is not even playing into it. How do you guys think Riker felt emotionally during these 2 episodes? And do you think he did a good job of suppressing his emotions? How do you think he actually felt during these episodes?
I feel like, well, he was obviously going through a lot of shit, so I felt like he was detached. Like, he forced himself to be detached so that he could, fulfill his duties and step up. You could definitely tell that when he was finally alone in the captain's room, he was trying to seek guidance from his now gone.
And what do you think Guinan meant with, like, you're trying to kill Locutus, you have to try to get rid of Picard? What do you think she meant by that, you guys?
Well, she was saying, when he was like, well, I tried to kill him just moments ago, she was like, no, you tried to kill whatever that was on the ship. Picard's still with you. She was saying that, like, you may be willing to kill his body, but you're not willing to let go of his influence.
Or his idea. Or the idea of him as a person, I definitely got that feeling as well, but I wanted to extend further and say Guinan was saying something a little more profound than that, right? She was saying, you have to kill the idea of what you think a captain is in order to become a captain yourself. And I think that's really what she was really trying to drive at, and it worked tremendously well.
Absolutely, it did. You guys have anything else to talk about?
No. I thought that I thought it was really interesting. Because it the entire episode seemed to be focused in on the Borg, but the Borg was literally just a device to push forward Riker's story, and I thought that was really interesting. That I think that's one of the reasons people love Star Trek so much, is because Star Trek is it's such a human show.
Yeah.
For being a show that's about discovering other things. It's about discovering yourself. It's pretty awesome because they're willing to come up with these really, really interesting ideas just to metaphorically push forward a character.
Absolutely.
And that's fantastic.
And people were waiting for the Borg to come around. I believe the episode was called Q Who, where they were first introduced, right?
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was called Q Who. But either way, they were waiting like a whole season and a half for the Borg to come back.
Yeah.
And then when they do, there's a lot of great misdirection that you just implied at. Like, the Borg are back, but the story is actually about Riker. And yeah, they assimilate Picard, but no, the story is actually about Riker.
It really is. And that's a very good point, Craig. Thank you. I also wanted to say a few closing thoughts. I was really glad that they obviously triumphed over it, but I was also interested in how Data actually played a role as well. And I wanted to talk about that specifically, how they kind of like, they being the Borg, discarded Data as this sort of inert, obsolete artificial intelligence, but he was instrumental in overthrowing the Borg collective through subcommands and hacking, really. Because that's, in a layman's term, that's what he was doing. And it was interesting how he came up with the different solutions throughout. And even though he is just this artificial entity in this particular series, he's still more human than anything the Borg could ever be. And that was just wonderful because that also added to the character development of Riker as well. Because Riker was realizing that, what's at stake here, right? What's at stake here is having an individual who is like the Borg, but can completely detach themselves from and make their own autonomous choices, helped him to empower him as a person to become the captain that he did.
Absolutely, and you can possibly argue that it was Data's remarkable performance in defeating the Borg that caught the Borg's attention later on in the motion picture. And of course, assimilating Picard was a fascinating experience for the Borg, as they admit later as well.
Yeah. The motion picture, or do you mean First Contact?
First Contact.
Yeah, I figured that's what you meant.
Well, I mean, Star Trek the motion picture doesn't have a monopoly on the words motion picture. So,
true, you're right. I'm sorry. I just wanted to clarify that.
Yeah.
Sorry for the confusion.
We forgive you.
We.
Oh, God. But this is a really thrilling episode, I would say. And, thank you guys for watching the video. Hopefully we went into some stuff that you didn't think about, or at least it was just fun to listen to. Just a really good episode.